Välkommen alla sammen, welcome to the channel where we look at Assassin's Creed from a historically accurate perspective, and today we are looking at the most accurate historical things about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So I released a video just the other day about the 5 most historically inaccurate things about the game, but I wanted to make this one too because there is a lot of good stuff in here, and there has been some very knowledgeable historians and experts working on this game, and a lot of things in here are very, very accurate. Number 1, the timeline. So the year in the game is set in 873, and a lot of the events happening around this time, like the invasions of England, the Danish settlements, the sons of Ragnar,
to the warmongering sons of Ragnar Lothbrok,
the invasion of Paris, the migration of Norwegians, right around this time. Was probably the most interesting time in the Viking Age, with so many different things like this happening, and the timeline lines up pretty perfectly for most of this stuff. So I'll let you know about the exact details when I get to play this a bit more, but for the most part, what I've seen, the timeline is very, very accurate in this game. Number 2, the poetry.
Orphan and sibling, warrior and poet.
So we have seen a little bit of this so far, where our playable character Eivor is known as a poet. And today we don't think of, poetry as being a very manly or a tough thing, but in the Viking world, some of the toughest heroes were the best poets. And also, the timing of the poetry here that we see in the game is a little bit off and random.
The bold sons of Ragnar bellow to sound the spear din and the thunder of shields. So let fall the arrow storm, the battle begins.
And we think, what the hell, where did that come from? He's just saying a poem out of nowhere. But this randomness is actually very accurate. In all of the sagas, it was very common that you would see some people just totally talking casually amongst each other, and then just out of nowhere, one of them would recite a few lines of poetry. So it is pretty accurate. For me, that would get a bit annoying, poetry popping up all over the place, but the Vikings really appreciated that. Also, we can see that you can train here in poetry with your village skald, and he'll help teach you, so you can compete in your little poetry battles like the Vikings did. Number 3, the migration of the Norwegians. The first king to unify Norway was King Harald Hårfagre, or King Harald Fairhair, which most of you know if you've seen the TV show Vikings, and he was kind of an asshole. So in all of the stories from the Viking Age, we get a lot of mentions of people dealing with King Harald, and basically, if they kissed his ass and did what he wanted, he was a very nice guy. He was very kind and rewarding and generous, but most Norwegians didn't really appreciate him trying to rule over them, and many of the smaller Norwegian tribes and kings fought back very hard at the start, but it just got to a point where Harald just got too strong and they couldn't fight him anymore. So
we cannot stay in Norway, not without fueling more war, so we push forward.
So it was at that time where many people, even the strongest and bravest Norwegian heroes and kings, moved out of Norway. And this lines up perfectly within the game and the time frame, of course. King Harald came into power in 872, and it just kind of went downhill in Norway from there until he died and his sons took over, and then they kind of split things up. But he ruled for... I think he ruled for about 60 years, but I'll check that and put that in the screen here. Number 4, the clothing. So there are, like I said, a lot of experts working on this game, and it shows here. The clothing seems to be very realistic. Sure, they maybe had to spruce it up a little bit for entertainment purposes, but overall, very accurate what I've seen in both the clothing and equipment, and the ships and the sails and the banners and everything like that, both from the Vikings in the game and also the Anglo-Saxons in the game, and even pretty accurate the Völva, or witches, that we have seen in the game so far. Just one thing to be aware of is that a lot of these really fancy articles of clothing we see were probably not for everyday use. I mean, you wouldn't be wearing your best leather or animal skins if you were traveling, in a ship across the sea or on the countryside on horseback. The nicest clothing you have would be reserved for special events like feasts or rituals or even battle, but it would be pretty regular clothes on the day-to-day basis. Number 5, the kindness and the brotherhood. So contrary to popular belief, the Vikings were actually very kind and peaceful, and they preferred to avoid violence if they could, and they really preferred to avoid any aggressive words. They were very polite to each other and were extremely loving and kind to family and others that they knew, and they were very careful as to what they said to strangers as to not offend them. The goal was to be kind and civil with everybody. Also, the Vikings did not harm innocent civilians. We have almost no evidence from history that the Vikings harmed women, children, or even civilians in general. So I'm sure there were a couple bad Vikings, of course, that did these things and liked to kill and rape and slavery, but most of the time, a raid was just strolling into a village and making the village people give up some of their stuff as a tribute. That's what most of the raids were from history. So violence, it only really happened when the natives of the village or kingdom fought back. But the Vikings preferred to avoid violence. They didn't hurt anybody unnecessarily. Also, we see a lot of examples from the sagas of the Vikings just making sure that civilians were kept safe. There are many mentions of 2 bands of warriors fighting each other, and they were feuding, and then one band of warriors was coming into the village to attack their enemy band of warriors, but before they attacked, before they started fighting, they would say to the women and children and even the slaves and servants to leave the area and get to safety before the men started fighting. So this game gets that right. Like I said, there are a couple bad Vikings in the game, but most of them are portrayed as good and honorable people, it seems, so far, and that's just like it would have been in real life. So that's about it for this video on the 5 most accurate things about the game so far. If you want to learn more about the Vikings, and especially their religious beliefs and their magic and spiritual practices, you can check out my other channel. That link is in the description below, but that's about it for today. Vi ses nästa gång.